You know, the question I get asked most often is, Tony, how do you go to the bathroom in the suit? Just like that.
I was a sophomore in high school when the first Avengers movie dropped. I still remember my friends and I being the first ones in front of the theater, watching the Hulk on a portable DVD player because it was the only previous MCU movie we hadn't seen at that point, and we really didn't have anything better to do. This is the only time I recommend watching the Hulk, by the way, with friends and when you have nothing better to do. Otherwise, not worth it. Not worth it at all. Iron Man in general is probably one of my favorite Marvel characters. I'm a sucker for power armor, loved the idea of having no power but your own intellect, and over time I began to empathize with Tony Stark's character. The MCU designs in general are iconic, and the Iron Man suit is no exception. The Mark 7 is probably one of my favorite iterations. Let's go ahead and get this guy out of the box. This figure manages to capture the look and feel of the suit quite well. The paintwork is absolutely fantastic as usual for Figma. It really evokes the feeling that it's made out of metal rather than plastic. Seriously, some of the best metallic paint jobs I've seen on a figure in quite some time. But I personally am not a fan of the rubbery bits they used on this figure, especially for the handguards. As you can see, if it's bent too often, the paint chips. Fortunately, this wasn't my fault as I bought this used. I'm assuming all of the other very minor paint dings were caused by the previous owner as well. The knee pads pop off if you so much as think about touching them. Fortunately, they're designed to do this to prevent them from breaking, but it's so sensitive that you might as well cut to the chase and remove them before bending his knee and then put him back. Also, what the frick are those? I have never seen a foot gap this bad in a Figma before. You'd think that they'd have gotten it right because they got it right with the other M Samus Aran, and that was made quite a while before this figure. I mean, both are armored foot designs, so I have no idea why this issue is so glaringly bad. It's not too much of a stretch to say that this is a design flaw that just shouldn't exist. And I understand that there are compromises that have to be made for the articulation, but this is just... no. Speaking of the articulation, he can look up that far and down that far. He can move his neck well enough to do the chicken dance. Even Iron Man can look both ways before crossing the street. He can spin the shoulders all the way around. Shoulder roll? Despite the shoulder pad, he can lift his arm fine. Elbow goes beyond 90 degrees, very nice. The ball joint in the wrist allows for a fairly standard amount of articulation, as well as a spin. And for the next warm-up, twist your torso from side to side. This armor bit right here can move back and forth, which allows for a beautiful ab crunch. And can we really appreciate just how seamless the back is when you crunch his abs too? Holy crap. And a good front kick with an almost as good back kick. One of the few knee bends I've done without the pads popping off. Toe bend. And the ankle can move about that far back. And you can bring it in about that far forward. Fairly standard amount of pivot. Tony's thigh armor is segmented, very interesting. If your leg does this, please see a doctor. A fairly normal split. I only have the standard edition, and the accessories are pretty scant. Basically just some alternate hands and the energy blasts. And right off the bat, I'm gonna have to say that I'm really disappointed that this figure doesn't come with a chest blast effect piece. The way that these other effect parts are made, you can't plug it into the chest, and even the deluxe edition of this figure doesn't come with the chest blast. For me, it was always one of the coolest moments in any Iron Man movie when he did the chest blast, especially in the first Avengers movie when Thor supercharged him, so not being able to recreate that moment is a huge bummer. That having been said, the effect parts are pretty decent. They look good without drawing too much attention to their construction. The more matte paintwork allows for contrast with the metallics of the figure. My biggest complaint with this figure is that the standard edition feels like a second-rate version of the figure. Other deluxe editions of Figmas feel like they go above and beyond the standard edition. For example, Figma Link, the Twilight Princess version, includes the starter set of weapons alongside the extra gadgets that aren't necessarily central to the character, but greatly augment the types of poses and situations you can pull off with the figure. Heck, the Splatoon Girl Deluxe version includes a second figure, for crying out loud. But I would argue that neither of those figures' standard editions feel incomplete, which is the feeling that I get from the standard edition of this Iron Man Figma. Heck, they didn't even include the visor-up alternate head, which I feel is critical to fully capturing this character. Sure, one could argue that things like the fold-out wings are something you'd only need in the deluxe edition, but seeing as this Marvel Legends figure of the rescue armor managed to include the wings for that figure at a $20 price point, I feel like it's not unreasonable to ask for an $80 figure to include a few more accessories. That's the real kicker. This Figma is noticeably more expensive than other Figmas. For example, the Figma Mikasa Ackerman, who was released 1 month later, was roughly $25 cheaper. And that came with just as many accessories. It definitely feels like they priced this higher because they knew people would pay for it anyway. And I get it, they would be stupid not to due to the popularity of the character, but for crying out loud, at least include some of the accessories that are essential to the character. Keep in mind that the Revoltech Iron Man Mark VII seems to have around the same level of accessories as the standard edition, but the wings can flip out and it's roughly $20 cheaper. At least he's got a good height. For comparison, here's Revoltech Gunbuster, the Marvel Legends Rescue Armor, the Figma Samus Aran, both versions, and the Masterpiece Soundwave. As for the final verdict, the posability and paintwork is fantastic as usual for Figmas, but the feet are a tad strange, the rubbery bits can be a little floppy, and the price point is significantly high for this figure despite it not having much accessories when compared to other figures of its cost. I'm also just really disappointed that the visor-up alt head is only in the deluxe edition. Don't get me wrong, this is still a good figure, but I wouldn't recommend buying the standard edition. Bite the bullet and get the deluxe, or buy one from a different brand that's more cost effective. Getting the standard edition kind of screws you out of either the cost efficiency or the features.